Time for Wednesday's hour number 2 on Hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. Korean dramas, movies and even lyrics. Why is the world paying attention to Korean stories?
From classics to modern masterpieces, time to dig deep into the charms of Korean literature.
On Check It Out
with Paul.
That's right, we've got Paul in the studio.
Hang on, what is that voice?
Hello, Paul.
What is this voice, Paul?
I don't know. Did you not say it like that?
With Paul.
I'm not very good at impressions, to be honest. And on that note, shall I do an impression and you can guess who it is?
Sure.
Okay. Hello. I'm a professor. I work in Korea and I'm on Lena's show. That's not really an impression, is it? That's kind of giving you clues.
Yeah, that's the thing with the impression. You don't actually say pretty much that it's David Tizard. You just
All right, okay, I'll do it again then. Okay. Hello. I'm not very good at this at all. That was Sir Alex Ferguson. Hello. I didn't want to give you any hints, so I just said hello. Because if I gave you hints, you might have had a go at me again. Sorry. It's Wednesday, Paul. It's nearly the end of May and I'm feeling a bit giddy.
You are feeling a bit giddy. I can sense it.
I'm on the cusp of June. I'm thinking about maybe making some summer holiday plans.
Oh, where are you going to go?
I don't know. I had to pay much more tax than I've ever needed to pay this year.
Really?
Yes, I had to change accountants as well. TMI for everyone listening, but that means maybe just a domestic getaway. Like, the listeners know because my mum's been on the show and I've mentioned it a few times. Like, her dream is to go to Hawaii and see her school friend who she hasn't seen since her mid-20s.
Sure.
Right? And they're both getting older and older, so I need to do it as soon as possible. But things keep on popping up and, excuses keep getting made. But that was maybe the plan. But I think now I don't have enough money to go to Hanam, let alone Hawaii. Yeah.
Oh, that's a serious situation, Peter. Maybe you can have a holiday here at Arirang Towers.
That would be lovely.
I hear the 10th floor is lovely.
Oh, and they've got that little deck out for smokers on the 5th floor. Maybe my mum.
Not suitable for your kids, really.
She used to smoke. My mum, again TMI, but she hasn't done.
Disclaimer:
so
Arirang does not recommend anybody.
Smoke. No smoking is bad. My mum quit after I gave her so many guilt trips across the years. How about you, Paul?
I've just been reading lots of long, boring books.
I didn't say that. See, Paul takes things to heart and he sulks in the corner. I said if our listeners want to recommend long, boring books in their opinion.
Well, the thing is, a boring book may be boring for someone, but really exciting for someone else.
Exactly.
So I don't judge. I am of the policy that I will try anything once.
Okay.
If I don't like it, I won't finish it.
Okay, you'll get.
But I will try it.
How, as a book expert, long into a book do you think you should give it before giving up? Do you have a recommended maybe number of pages?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's 2 steps.
All right.
Okay, if you're not into it by the first 50 pages, it's not a good sign.
That's a long way into a book.
No,
I'm hoping my book has finished 3 times within 50 pages.
No, and at the 100-page point, at that point, I will say, no,
really?
Giving it up.
Okay, so these are full-fledged novels. Which
we're talking an average novella is going to be anywhere from 180 to 500 pages.
Wow. So you'll give it a good chance, though.
Absolutely.
At least 50.
Because sometimes, I remember, the perfect example is Jan Martel's Life of Pi, which is a brilliant book.
Yeah, love the film.
But the first 150 pages are a bit of a slog.
Oh, well done. You've recommended to me audiobooks. And
I have.
I know it's different, an audiobook, to actually reading it on the page. But there are definitely some of those where I started listening and I was just like, oh, no thanks. And then I ran out of my other purchases and I had nothing else to listen to but that. I went back and I was like, this is amazing.
Well, that's the thing. Some books hook you in from the very first page. Some books, they need a little bit of setup before you really get into it. My best example, and I loved it, was Stephen King's Fairy Tale, one of his most recent books.
Oh.
It's not a Korean book, I'm sorry, but it's a very good one.
Yeah.
I listened to it on audiobook, and the first 4 hours were basically about a teenage boy making friends with an old man and his dog.
Okay.
And that was it. But I was entranced. It was only after about 4 hours that the fantasy element started.
Oh, wow. What a setup, yeah.
But sometimes you need the time to get in and to know the characters so that you really can empathize with them and feel for them.
I feel the same with maybe some movies and dramas that are slow burners. You actually get more out of it if you stick with it and it ends up being good.
If it ends up being good.
If it doesn't, then
the glory, I'm looking at you.
Uh-oh. Sunflower gives us a little strategy with books to see whether they're worth reading.
Yeah.
I wonder if you agree. Read the last chapter.
No. I know there are people that do it. I'm not gonna attack you for doing it, but no, I don't know. I don't want to know what happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can guess what's going to happen. Sometimes I'm completely surprised.
Yeah.
But one of the joys is getting to the end of the book and going, that's what the journey was.
Yeah, me too. I don't like knowing the end of anything, a film, a drama.
Usually the butler did it.
Really? Don't trust the butler. Any butlers in today's book?
No, and it's very short.
Okay.
Just for you, Peter, because I know you don't like long books.
Good.
This is a short story today, a very serious one. It's from the Penguin Book of Korean Short Stories we featured a fair few times before.
Yes.
A really gem-filled collection of classics and modern fiction.
Nothing to do with real penguins.
No, it's the name of the publisher.
Okay, good. Just wanted to clear that up.
Okay, so the name of the story we're going to look at is Time for You and Me. It's by Hwang Sun-won, translated by Bruce and Juchan Fulton, and we're taken straight into the aftermath of some battle.
Okay.
We don't know. We think it's set during the Korean War.
Oh.
That seems to be where it is.
Okay.
There's 3 soldiers who are desperately struggling to survive, and they're looking for help.
Oh dear, that sounds rather desperate, that situation itself. So the Penguin Book of Korean Short Stories, there's lots of different authors featured within that, right?
There are, but it's mostly Bruce Fulton was doing the editing, so it's a lot of his translations, along with his partner, Juchan Fulton, and others.
Have we heard from Hwang before?
We have. I mean, you surely know his most famous story. Sonagi.
I was going to say...
Sonagi? Am I saying that right? Sonagi.
Toji.
No,
It's
Sonagi.
not land, is it? No, that's
Do you not know Sonagi?
I know what the word means, like a
Do you not know the short story? I'm
shower.
looking at Mini PD. You studied this story in school, didn't you?
I didn't go to the same school as Minnie, that's why.
Okay. All right. The translation is The Shower, and it is the most brilliant piece of Korean classic short fiction. We've done it on the show before. I'm surprised you don't remember. It's about a boy and a girl, and they go for a walk, and he likes her, and she likes him, and they end up caught in a rain shower.
Okay.
And they have to hide in a barn.
Oh.
It's a beautiful story. This is very different, though. Okay. This is a lot more serious. But he is one of those classic writers of the early 20th century. Mm-hmm. He was born in Taedong, which is now North Korea, in 1915. He started writing, made his literary debut as a middle school student.
Wow.
And then he got into poetry, into the arts. He studied in Japan, released his first poetry collection at the age of 19. His first story just 3 years later at the age of 22. Lived through the occupation, lived through the Korean War, ended up becoming a professor at Kyunghee University, and he wrote throughout the 20th century. He passed away in 2000. He was a man of the 20th century.
Oh, wow.
We have some of his novels and certainly short stories translated into English, and it's good to feature him. I think this is the 3rd time we've had him on the show.
Fantastic. And yeah, he did end up living here, right, and being a professor at a university in South Korea. The translation couple, the duo Bruce and Juchan Fulton, we featured numerous times.
Exactly. I think if you're a regular listener to the show, you'll be very familiar with them. They met when Bruce came to Korea. I think it was back in the early 1970s with the Peace Corps. They've been translating for decades. They were sort of at the vanguard of translating Korean into English. And they're a little bit old school. Yeah. And I think there are some more modern translators who have overtaken them in style. But what I love about this book is that you get a great sample over about 120 years of Korean fiction.
Wow, that's brilliant. A little snapshot. This one isn't free to see online.
No, you'd have to buy, borrow, rent, steal, pirate, whatever your choice.
Fantastic.
Disclaimer.
So. Yeah.
Borrow or buy.
Yeah, that's what we're recommending, above board. So, as always, we've split it up into 3 actual excerpts from the short story.
We have.
With the first reading, we're starting at the beginning? Or?
We are.
Okay, here we go.
And now it was the second day. The surroundings were the same, a succession of ravines and rounded summits as far as the eye could see. Nothing seemed to move, not even the air. Captain Chu was supported by a man on each side, held by an arm around the shoulder of each, but still he kept slumping towards the ground. He was more or less being dragged, incapable of walking on his own because of the wound to his thigh. Right off, the men had applied direct pressure and staunched the blood flow. Fortunately, the bullet had missed the major artery and there seemed to be no nerve damage, and the men had managed to thread their way through enemy lines. But by morning, Chu was experiencing numbness, followed by sharp pain. Infection? Chu was well aware of the tremendous boost to the spirit that access to a specific route would offer a party transporting a wounded man. But the men weren't following a route, had no specific destination, were simply walking southward. Chu knew of a soldier shot in the lower abdomen who had stuffed the entry wound with his fatigue shirt and made it back to base, a 30-minute-plus trudge before collapsing. Having a certain destination and knowing how to get there made this possible in spite of the near-fatal wound. There was no such route for Chu and the two men, but Chu couldn't bring himself to tell Lieutenant Hyun and Private First Class Kim that he could no longer walk and that they should leave him and proceed by themselves, for being left behind meant death. When Kim suggested carrying him on his back, Chu silently assented. Kim had turned 19 that year and having grown up in a farming village was able to carry Chu a considerable distance. Then came Hyun's turn. Hyun had a quick look at Chu, registered the pistol holstered at the captain's waist. The men had long since rid themselves of knapsack, helmet, rifle and fatigue jacket. Chu's pistol was the only weapon among them. Chu noticed Hyun's glance and read the thought underlying it. Now that he was unable to move unaided, his body was a nuisance to the two men carrying it. But there was no way these two men could abandon their superior and continue on alone. Instead, they were waiting for him to accept the reality of their situation and use the pistol to do away with himself.
Yeah, when you introduced the story and when we started reading it, I thought, yeah, this is all about the team, the three of them going through it together, struggling against the odds. But it seems they all quickly come to this realization that one person is really literally weighing them down.
Yeah.
I don't know what this says about me, but I thought when he looked at the pistol, he was thinking, can I grab it and shoot him before he grabs it and shoots me?
I don't think he's got to that point yet, but he's looking at that pistol and thinking, you know what you should do as the captain.
Oh.
You know we can't abandon you, and yet you do not do what you should.
Even though he's the junior, the subordinate, and, you know, I don't know, still in Korean culture, there's really that sonhube thing. I guess you would naturally think that, right? Because your life is on the line.
Yeah, because the two of them who aren't wounded, maybe they have a chance.
Yeah.
Chu, he's slowing them down. Yeah. And so this is a really difficult situation. Kim, on the other hand, the private, he's younger, he's 19, he's innocent, he's more righteous, and he wants to do whatever he can to help the captain.
Okay.
But it's the second day, as it said at that very first sentence. It's taken a toll on all of them. You know, they've been foraging for roots that they can eat as they go. If there's a stream, they'll get some water, but this is not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
And they're getting more and more exhausted. And as they get more exhausted, they can't walk as far. Okay. So as the hours pass, they make less and less progress.
And they got to keep moving, right? They don't want to be caught by enemies. They need to find the allies. And
they do, but it's taking its toll, and especially on Hyun, he has to carry Chu, and he's starting to see holes in the soil, and sees ants in the soil, and you're not sure whether this is real or it's a hallucination.
Okay.
And then he sees one giant ant compared to the others, decapitating the other ants as they come out of the hole.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's not a good image in his mind.
Uh-huh.
And Hyun is just thinking, come on, Captain, you've got to give up your life so that we can survive.
He's not saying this, of course.
No, but that's what's going through his mind. And he's thinking about the fact that he got a letter from his sweetheart just a few days ago, that they finally sort of moved to that next step of the relationship.
Okay.
That is his future. He wants to see her again.
So he's got to survive.
Yeah, but the problem is that all that's in front of them are these ravines and mountains.
Again and again, that is Korea, right?
Yeah, and so they're on this ridge, and Hyun's like, look, let's go down into the ravine.
Mm-hmm.
And Kim's saying, no, we could get lost in the woods down there. It would be more effort, and then we'd have to climb back up again. It's going to be too much for us. Let's follow the ridge.
Okay.
And of course, Chu, being the captain,
Yeah.
has to make the decision. And he goes with Kim's plan.
Okay.
And so Hyun, again, he's not feeling good, and he's anxious, and he's worrying, and there's the holes, and there's the ants, and he's not in a good mental state.
It's not going his way.
No. And they stop at sundown, and they've managed to catch a snake.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they cook it, they eat it, a little bit of food, a little bit of meat. And Hyun seems like he's going off to use the bathroom, off for a call of nature. But he doesn't come back.
Oh, at all?
Yeah, they wait for him and he doesn't return. And the captain, Chu, he says to Kim, look, you can go. Just go. Hyun obviously couldn't wait for me any longer for me to kill myself.
Oh, he says
so
this.
you go. You survive. I'm done for.
Yeah.
But Kim, being the righteous sort of innocent man that he is, says, no, I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to stick with you.
Wow.
But the thing is, there were two before carrying Chu. Now there's only one.
Oh, no.
Which means they're making even less progress. And then the next night, Kim's sleeping and Chu's awake. He's just been carried all day. And he thinks to a woman he met just a few months earlier in Busan and the story she told him.
Oh, happier times. This is our second excerpt.
And then for some reason he couldn't have explained, thoughts of the woman came to mind. A few months earlier, his unit had retaken a strategic position high in the mountains, and he'd been awarded several days of leave. He'd gone to Busan and bought the woman's services for a night. She told him that around the time of the 4th of January 1951 retreat, she'd been working at a bar in Seoul when a girl rushed in one evening at sundown pursued by 3 foreign soldiers. She'd helped the girl escape out the back door, but then in the back room was forced to take the soldiers in her place. She didn't think of them as 3 individuals, wanted only to turn off her mind and get it over with. And after a seemingly endless night, she awoke to the faint light of dawn coming through the window. And then, whom should she run into on the street the next day but the very same girl? She didn't recognize her at first, but felt incredibly thankful that the girl had come right up to her with a look of obvious delight. And when the girl said she wanted to do something for her, she was overwhelmed. As Chu listened to this heartwarming story, he had an urge to pinpoint the purpose of it. So you're saying that in order to relive that feeling of overwhelming gratitude, you would put yourself in the same situation, turning off your mind, as you say, until the first light of dawn? In the darkness, the woman lit a cigarette, and Chu heard her say, well, you can't really plan a situation like that. It's just that I found myself there with a girl. And aren't people capable of doing something that seems to make no sense when they think about it afterwards? That was what happened with me and the girl, but if I were in the same situation again, I'm not sure what I would do. Maybe the same, maybe not. And that was the end of their conversation. Looking back now, Chu realized that over the course of the battles he'd lived through, he too had done things he didn't know he was capable of. Every time he encountered an unanticipated situation, he'd reacted in a way he'd never expected. No sooner did he realize this than a new thought flashed across his mind. When he had asked the woman sarcastically if, confronted with the same situation, she would again take the place of the other person, wasn't it possible that in a corner of his mind he approved of what she had done and was hoping deep down inside she would react in the same way the next time? But now, with death facing him as he lay at night on a mountain ridge, he couldn't help feeling he had no right to wish anything of the woman regardless of a situation. What of a third party? Knowing of the experiences that had befallen Chu on the battlefield, had presumed to tell him he should have done such and so. No way.
That's intriguing, comparing the situation of the woman to his battles. And if someone said, same thing happens again, would you be so perhaps righteous in that situation, sacrificing yourself?
We never know how we're going to be in whatever emergency situation we may find ourselves in. And I hope for all our listeners' sakes that there's not an emergency situation for them anytime soon.
No, of course. And then that's also very true and very human, isn't it? If you do something that from the outside looks like something heroic, you might well regret it, or at least you might say, well, I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah.
That might be very natural. It doesn't sound like something from a movie or a book,
and you may not understand why you did it in the first place, but you did.
Yeah.
And so this is the situation, and it's running through Chu's mind that he's in that sort of situation again, is what do I do?
Is he getting bitter and losing hope, or what's happening here?
Well, there is no hope, I think. He's not bitter, but he's realistic about the situation. They'll keep going, but it's not looking hopeful.
Oh, dear.
And so they do. They find a spring. They've got fresh water. They manage to catch a few frogs. They eat them raw.
Oh, my goodness.
And then that evening they approach a bend, and as they turn, they see crows circling. And as they draw nearer, they see crows feasting on a body.
Oh, no.
And it's Lieutenant Hyun's body.
Oh, no. What happened to Lieutenant Hyun?
Oh, he's obviously died of exhaustion.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, and Kim seeing that is just traumatized. He feels like they're next, that the crows are going to be pecking out their eyes instead of Lieutenant Hyun's tomorrows.
Dear.
And Kim, he wishes this awful thought on himself. He wishes he could die first and not have to witness the crows eating the captain's eyes.
Oh, goodness.
But again, it's that situation where you find yourself in an impossible circumstance and you have these impossible thoughts running through your head.
Of course.
And then in the middle of the night, they hear artillery.
Oh, dear.
And Chu is like, well, that's our side's weapons. That's the south.
Okay.
But they sound like they're at least sort of 4 days away.
Oh,
and
goodness.
The pace we're getting there's no chance of getting to them. And then Chu looks at his pistol again, and he knows he's dying. He can feel himself dying by the hour, and he makes a choice. In the same way that woman, when she was in Seoul, made a choice.
Yeah.
And he thinks, okay, I'm going to chase Kim away. I'm going to make him go, threaten him with the gun.
So that he can have a chance?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm done for, but maybe if he heads off towards the artillery, maybe by himself he can get there.
Okay.
And so he does. He gets his gun out and he says, you go, you seek the artillery fire, you go to where we heard that sound. And then, just as he does that, they hear a closer, different sound. At that exact moment, a different sound made itself heard among the distant boom of the artillery. Chu was dubious but strained to listen. "What's that sound?" he asked Kim. He saw Kim lift his head and try to focus, then heard him say, "What sound?" Can't hear it now." But then he heard it again, as if it were being carried on the wind. "There! Do you hear it? It's coming from behind us." Still, Kim heard nothing. "Sounds like a dog barking." At this, Kim's tired body jerked up to a sitting position, and he turned and waddled off on his knees. If indeed a dog was barking, there had to be a dwelling not far away. "Just cross over that ridge," shouted Chu. But Kim still heard nothing. Finally, he backpedaled towards their resting spot. There was something Chu wanted to give Kim, something he himself wanted as well. Kim lay down, muttering, "By tomorrow there'll be more of those crows. Tonight's the last time we'll have our eyes." He had barely finished when the crack of a gunshot assaulted his ears. Startled, he rolled over to see Chu, training his pistol on him in the darkness. "Get me on your back," said Chu, in a tone surprisingly clear, considering his choked voice. Not knowing what to make of this, Kim could only rise and do as Chu instructed. "All right, move!" Kim felt the muzzle of the pistol against the back of his right ear. They crossed the ridge and entered a dark forest. "Hang on a moment." Once Kim had stopped, Chu listened carefully, then said, "Go left." A short time later, Chu said, "Hold it!" and then, "Forward!" Kim went left, went right, went straight ahead, following Chu's orders, knowing his life depended on it. But in all that time, he heard nothing. Perhaps the captain faced with death was hearing things. And if that was the case, why did this episode have to end with both of them dying? Having toiled to transport Chu by himself since the previous night, he couldn't help feeling a surge of resentment. But he couldn't stop walking. What with the muzzle of the pistol resting against the back of his ear, that muzzle was keeping his tottering legs in motion. They reached the foot of a mountain. Go right! And then, straight ahead! Only then did Kim hear it. The barking of a dog. It gradually became clearer, but he couldn't tell how far off it was. From his throat came hot, panting breath. His only thought was that his barely moving legs were sinking, ever sinking into something bottomless. He wanted only to plop down where he was, but he was in no position to be resting. The muzzle of the pistol was, if anything, pushing more forcefully against his ear. He couldn't see a thing, scarcely realized he was still putting one foot in front of the other. And then off, in the darkness, there appeared an outline, a thatch-roofed hut, and before it 2 more outlines. A man and a barking dog, and the moment these images registered faintly in his soporific vision, he was freed of the muzzle at his ear and Chu's weight on his back.
I know in the book there is not this necessarily uplifting, hopeful music, but surely that means that everything's okay. They live happily ever after, forever and ever.
I think Kim may.
Maybe that's like a symbolic weight of Chu off his back. Maybe he's done for.
Yeah, I think at least this is the way I interpret it. And you can think that Chu survives,
this
but
is
that
the end.
feeling, this is the end of the story.
Okay.
It feels like the captain has used the last of whatever he had to push Kim on in the same way that that woman was pushed and lost her mind that night and was so grateful to see the girl afterwards.
Yeah.
He wants to give Kim this gift.
Okay.
He will use the last of his energy and he will threaten Kim and he will push him to the very edge of his own sanity and strength.
Yeah.
So that Kim can survive.
Oh, that's
lovely. This is not about Chu surviving, I think.
No.
And again, this is my interpretation. And I interpret it as that final moment as Chu topples from his back, that's Chu's last breath.
Yeah.
His job is done. He has made sure his private, as the captain, has got to safety.
The righteous one that stood by him as well, right?
Yeah, and I think it's an incredible story. It's really a testament to the survival of Koreans. I'm not talking about the Koreans born from the 90s onwards. I'm talking about the Koreans born in the early and mid-20th century.
Yeah.
It could be during occupation, it could be during the Korean War, it could be after the Korean War up until the 1980s, that people had to find the strength to hold on until they could take that one last step, or they could do that one last thing, or they could get to democracy and freedom.
They just have to grin and bear it sometimes, some awful things happening, right?
Yeah. I had a taxi driver, I think it was on Monday, and we were chatting, and he was in his mid-70s. He was born pretty much during the Korean War.
Oh, wow.
And we were talking about his life, and he was talking about how things have changed a lot. And you can hear through the way that he was talking how resilient he had been, but also how kind he was.
Oh.
We were talking about kindness and how there were a lot of scam artists these days and a lot of unkind people, and he was missing the kindness of the old days. And we talked about how
Stranger's kindness, right?
Yeah, that idea that through hardship people were doing their best for each other. And that you had parents who would be surviving just so they could make sure that their children got to a better place than they were, that their grandchildren could survive.
Sacrificing everything. I mean, I think that aspect of career is still very much alive. Parents doing everything for their kids, maybe sometimes a bit misguided in paying for all their hagwons and stressful studies. But again, the aim is to try and give them a step up in society. They will do everything.
But at the same time now I see a bigger selfishness than there was maybe 25 years ago when I first came here. I think that nowadays Koreans are more focused on their own family rather than their neighbors.
100%.
Yeah. And it used to be before these big apartment blocks when you lived in little communities. And I remember living in Itaewon where it did feel like that, where you watched out for the people in your neighborhood and you greeted the people in your neighborhood. And if there was something going on, you would make sure they were okay.
Yeah. I mean, even when I came to Korea in like the 80s and 90s, the apartments, they were set up differently to new apartments where you just have a long corridor and sometimes doors would be all open in the summertime.
Yeah, and also a corridor that would be outside.
Yes.
You would have this corridor balcony.
Yeah, it was kind of nice that way. Now, we've all got our little compartments. They're all trying as hard as they can to not face each other so you don't have to interact with any people. And you don't know your neighbours. But back then, you'd still drop in next door, give some punch and some side dishes and whatnot.
Yes, so I think this epitomizes that feeling of Chu and Kim, who don't know each other. They're captain and private. There's a big age difference. And yet, because of the way that Kim respects Chu and wants to do all he can, Chu is willing to sacrifice himself so that Kim can maybe live to see another day.
Yeah, Korea has come so far and developed so much in that short space of time.
Yeah.
What are we from the Korean War?
71 years coming up this June. 6.25. The 25th of June will be the 71st anniversary of the end of the Korean War. That's one person's life.
Yeah.
In that Korea has changed in all these ways.
Yeah, completely, right? Nearly 180 degrees. We often talk about it. It was like the poorest country on the planet by some measures, and now doing so well. But at what cost, I suppose, right?
Well, that's the big question, and whether we are still remembering those who did so much to get us here. Like your mum, for example. Is she getting the respect that she deserves? I'm not talking about you, because you do respect your mum, but I'm talking about from society in general. Those who are in their 50s, 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, who worked so that Korea could be where it is in 2024.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those people do feel underappreciated. They do feel like the younger generation don't know what they went through. And I think that's true in many cases.
Well, this is the problem. I think we're seeing it in the UK now, whereas we grew up knowing grandparents who fought in the Second World War, for example, who talked about the hardship.
Yeah.
Whereas kids born in the last 20 years would not have had that family connection. It would have been one step extra away from what happened from that world tragedy.
Yeah, and I suppose, looking at my kids and my kids' friends and their parents, their parents grew up in the 80s and 90s here when, things were getting better and better already. And so they don't have that link. But I don't know what's right. How can you do it? Obviously, you learn at school, but it doesn't feel the same. You don't feel that close connection to it.
Well, this is the thing. You can't stop the travel of time. You can't stop people becoming more distant. The terrible thing is that history repeats itself, and we're looking at history now. What's happening in the Middle East? What's happening in Eastern Europe? That we could face wars again. That Korea could be in crisis again. I mean, the other thing to point out is that we're 71 years out from the Korean War, but we're officially still at war.
Yeah.
There's an armistice, there's a ceasefire, but the war never ended.
Yeah, we need to bear that in mind. Definitely hope that history doesn't repeat itself. Sunflower saying, Paul, you were Peter's rescuer not too long ago. You were indeed, when my voice was on its last legs.
He held a pistol to my head and said, host the show.
Oh, I thought it'd be the other. So does that mean I'm Chu? Oh, dear.
Yeah.
I don't want to be Chu. Your one-line review of this, Paul, please.
A painful, gripping short story that has you on the edge of your seat.
Absolutely. That was brilliant and, quite detailed as well in that short little text. Next week's book?
We got a great one. We got a new anthology by Yoon Go-eun. It's called Table for One. We did the short story Table for One that was published separately before. Okay. So we're going to do a story from it called Don't Cry Hongdo. It's translated by Lizzie Buller. It's an anthology. It's out. It's available online as an ebook or as a paperback.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for your beautiful reading as always.
Thanks to everyone. Thanks to the LTI Korea for the help with copyright permission as always. Thanks to Hwang Sun-won for his moving short story and Bruce and Ju-chan Fulton for their excellent translation. I'll be back next week with another book.
You can listen to Check It Out with Paul Matthews on Arirang Radio's #DailyK every Wednesday from 10 a.m. KST.